No one in the arena expected anything extraordinary when the next contestant walked onto the AGT stage. The lights were gentle, the crowd was restless, and the judges were prepared for just another performance. Yet there was something quietly unusual about the man standing beneath the bright glow, something soft, hopeful, and almost trembling. He wasn't tall. He wasn't flashy. He didn't carry the confidence of someone who had already lived 1,000 stages. Instead, he carried something deeper, something life had shaped through struggle, sacrifice, and long, unnoticed nights. His name was Emilio Reyes, a Filipino immigrant with the heart of a dreamer and the weight of real life resting on his shoulders. Behind him, in the shadows of the stage wings, stood Luz, his younger sister, gentle, steady, and carrying more belief in Emilio than he had ever found in himself. She had worked extra shifts, saved every spare dollar, and pushed him toward this moment. Beside her was Daniel, Emilio's childhood friend, quiet but fiercely loyal, the kind of friend who stayed even when success seemed impossible. Together, they formed a tiny circle of hope in a world that often overlooked people like them. As Emilio stood still under the lights, the arena felt larger than life. The rows of people stretched endlessly into darkness. The cameras hovered like curious eyes. The judges watched with unreadable expressions. It was the kind of moment capable of swallowing a person whole. But inside Emilio's heart, something else was happening. A memory stirred, his father spinning old Elvis vinyls in the small family home in Manila. Emilio remembered those evenings, how music filled their house with warmth even when money couldn't. He remembered singing softly to avoid waking the neighbors, dreaming of stages he had never seen. And now, he was finally standing on one. A quiet tension moved through the room. Not silence, expectation. The kind that wrapped around a person like a test, waiting to see who they would become. No one knew what would happen next. No one knew they were seconds away from witnessing something unforgettable. And certainly, no one expected a Filipino Elvis to turn the AGT stage into a full concert. The moment the music began, something subtle shifted in the air, almost like the whole arena inhaled at once. A soft vibration rolled through the speakers, and a single spotlight tightened around Emilio, trapping him inside its radiant circle. For a second, he looked fragile, like a man caught between who he used to be and who he hoped to become. Then he lowered his shoulders, and the first note slipped out. It wasn't loud. It wasn't forced. It was pure, so pure that the room seemed to still around it. A warm, velvety tone, touched with a familiar echo of a voice the world once adored. Not copied. Not mimicked. But carried, like a legacy stitched into the heart of a man who had spent years singing in empty rooms and quiet corners. The audience froze. The judges leaned forward. And Luz, watching from the wings, felt her eyes fill with tears. That single note carried his whole life with it, every sacrifice, every moment of doubt, every dream he had dared to whisper into the night. It held the memory of those Manila evenings when his father taught him how to feel a song, not just sing it. It held the weight of every job he took in America to support his family back home. It held the loneliness of being an immigrant who worked hard, stayed quiet, and hoped life would one day see him. The note swelled into the arena, and suddenly, the stage did not hold a contestant anymore. It held a storyteller. A man singing not for fame, but for survival, for the belief that maybe, just maybe, he belonged somewhere. The cameras panned across the crowd, capturing faces that had shifted from boredom to disbelief. People leaned forward as though pulled by an invisible thread, as though the sound itself had wrapped its arms around them. Then Emilio moved, just a small sway, a gentle lift of the shoulders. Something awakened inside him, something he had long feared to reveal. And the transformation began. His stance grew stronger. His voice deepened. His presence thickened with confidence he didn't know he had. The AGT stage was no longer a competition floor. It was becoming a concert arena. And Emilio, for the first time in his life, was becoming the star of it. As the music swelled into its second verse, something remarkable unfolded, slowly at first, then all at once, like a ripple turning into a wave. Emilio's voice rose with a deeper strength, richer than before, shaped by years of singing alone but dreaming in full color. The audience felt it before they understood it. A vibration. A rush of warmth. A sudden pull toward the stage. People who were just moments ago scrolling on their phones now lifted their heads, eyes widening as if they had stumbled upon a secret. It was the shift that happens not during a typical performance, but in moments when someone unexpectedly reminds the world what true talent feels like. Emilio took another small step forward. Then another. And with each step, the arena lit up a little more. His voice poured out like a river finding its path, steady, unstoppable, glowing with emotion that couldn't be faked. The smooth lower notes, the vintage crackle of soul, the rising tremble that felt like raw hope, everything merged into a sound that felt both nostalgic and electric. It wasn't imitation. It wasn't cosplay. It was authenticity shaped by struggle. Luz pressed her hands over her mouth, watching her brother transform into someone the world had never seen before, an artist who carried the golden echoes of the past but sang as a man who had fought for every inch of his present. Daniel stood beside her, too stunned to move, realizing that this was no longer about talent. This was about destiny, about a man who had spent his life hiding behind responsibilities finally stepping into the light he always deserved. The judges' faces softened, their eyes sharpening with recognition. They weren't just witnessing a vocal performance. They were witnessing a story, one spoken through tone and breath and the trembling courage of a man who had once believed his dreams were too heavy to carry. The crowd leaned in, some placing their hands on their chests without realizing it. The music wasn't just heard. It was felt, deep inside the ribs, where old memories and quiet dreams sleep. And somewhere in that growing wave of emotion, the arena finally understood something beautiful. Emilio wasn't just performing. He was awakening the entire room. The AGT stage was changing shape before everyone's eyes, stretching, glowing, expanding until it felt less like a talent show and more like a concert hall filled with soul. And the Filipino Elvis was just getting started. As the chorus approached, something inside Emilio finally broke free. It wasn't fear. It wasn't pressure. It was a wave of courage that had been waiting for years, waiting for this exact moment, on this exact stage, beneath these blinding lights. His body loosened. His shoulders settled. And suddenly, he moved with a rhythm that felt natural, as if the music had reached inside him and guided every step. The arena reacted instantly. A roar rose through the crowd, not planned, not polite, real. A sound born from shock, recognition, and joy all at once. People leaned forward, clapped their hands, and some even stood without knowing why. The judges exchanged glances, the kind that only appear when something truly unexpected is unfolding. Emilio lifted the microphone with a confidence he had never shown before. The lights brightened behind him, creating a glow like a rising sun. It wasn't a performance anymore. It was a transformation. He slid into the next verse with a stronger voice, richer, brighter, echoing through every corner of the arena. His foot tapped lightly. His hips swayed with effortless rhythm. His hands followed the beat. And with each movement, the crowd felt the unmistakable soul of a legend flicker through him. But it wasn't mimicry. It wasn't a tribute act. It was something deeper. A man honoring the music that raised him, while pouring his own life into every single note. The stage lights pulsed like a heartbeat. Blues and golds washed over him, wrapping him in a warmth that made the moment feel alive. Cameras zoomed in, capturing the shine in his eyes, the shine of a dream finally breathing. Luz watched from backstage, trembling with pride. She knew this version of her brother, the man who sang while fixing broken chairs, who hummed while washing dishes, who carried music like a second heartbeat. Now the world was finally seeing what she had always known. Daniel stepped closer, unable to contain his smile. His friend looked like he belonged here, like he had been waiting for this stage all his life. And then it happened. A lift in the music, a swell in the melody, a moment designed for greatness. Emilio hit the powerful high note. The arena erupted. The judges froze. The crowd screamed like they were at a stadium show. The AGT stage wasn't a stage anymore. It had become a full concert. A celebration. A moment that felt larger than life. And the Filipino Elvis, once uncertain, quiet, and underestimated, stood at the center of it all, shining like he was born for this. When the final note faded, the silence that followed was louder than any applause could ever be. It wasn't the silence of hesitation. It was the silence of awe, of an arena trying to catch up with what it had just witnessed. A silence so full, it almost felt sacred. Emilio stood in the center of the stage, his chest rising with slow, heavy breaths. His hands trembled slightly, not from fear, but from the overwhelming realization that he had finally done it, he had finally stepped into the version of himself he had long believed he was not worthy of becoming. He didn't move. He didn't smile. He just stood there, suspended in a moment that felt too big for words. Then, without warning, the arena erupted. People leapt to their feet. Hands crashed together in applause. Voices rose in cheers that shook the entire room. The judges stood too, slowly at first, then with full conviction. Their faces were lit with expressions of disbelief and admiration, the kind reserved only for the rarest performances, those that reach beyond sound and touch something deeper. From backstage, Luz pressed her forehead against the cold metal frame of the stage entrance, tears falling freely. She had prayed for this moment, fought for it, sacrificed for it, believing in her brother even on the days he could not believe in himself. Now she watched him glow under the lights, the world finally seeing the greatness she had always known. Daniel stood beside her with a hand over his heart. He knew what Emilio had endured to reach this point, years of working odd jobs, sending money home, saving little for himself. Years of pushing his own dreams aside for responsibility. Years of singing quietly so the neighbors wouldn't complain, dreaming loudly but never admitting it. And now, that quiet dream was standing in front of the world. Cameras zoomed in, capturing the raw emotion on Emilio's face, the mix of disbelief, gratitude, and a lifetime of held-back tears. The moment didn't feel like a victory. It felt like freedom. Like a man finally stepping out of his own shadow. The arena kept roaring, the cheers growing louder, sharper, heavier with emotion. It didn't feel like applause for a contestant. It felt like applause for a hero, the everyday hero who rises after every fall, who keeps going despite the world overlooking him. Somewhere in the sea of noise and lights and glory, a realization settled over the entire audience. They hadn't just witnessed a performance. They had witnessed a rebirth. A man finding his voice. A dream finding its wings. A soul finally being seen. And as Emilio stood there, humbled, shining, transformed, the AGT stage felt like a new beginning. For him. For his family. For the thousands watching. And for anyone who had ever been underestimated. The Filipino Elvis wasn't just a nickname anymore. It was a crown, one he had just earned in front of the entire world.